Welcome back to another episode of Twisted Metal Companion. I'm Peter. Unfortunately, Tyler was not able to join in. He had something come up and wasn't able to be here. But today we have another interview, a very special one. Um, I got educated during my research, and I hope you guys will too. But joining me on today's episode is Angel Giuffria, who plays Tinker. How you doing?
Hey, how are you? I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, so thank you for carving out some time to speak with me. As I mentioned, I did some research and had I known all of the stuff out there that you're a part of, I wish I had started my research sooner because there's just so much stuff, right? I didn't even get a chance to get into like some of your previous work because I
Mm,
like to watch episodes or a movie if I can fit it in. But Tyler was able to get in. Let's see if I still have it up. It was the one about something about monsters. There was a
no such thing as monsters.
those he watched that and he quite enjoyed you in it.
Oh,
So
great. That's great to
yeah,
hear.
yeah.
I
So
was
he
trapped
reached
in
out,
Australia for 2 months getting getting tortured.
trapped.
It's a horror movie.
But no, he texted me like an hour, kind of prior to the recording. He's like, dude, sorry, this came up, but I was able to see this and I quite enjoyed it. And I was like, well, I'll pass it along. And anything else you're able to share, which I don't think he's texted me since, but so he did check that out. But
I appreciate it.
you're a busy gal. And you have been all your life advocating and speaking and appearances and all these different things. Um, I don't even know where to start because so many things. Twisted Metal dropped, and then all the strikes happened, and you were out there picketing as well.
Mhm.
Let's start with that. Like, can you kind of go back around the time as Twisted Metal's getting to release and shit hit the fan?
Yeah, for sure. It was rough, right? I was so excited. I was so excited for it to drop. I was so excited for Tinker. I love Tinker as a character. Like she kicks ass and that's awesome. And as a disabled character, a lot of times I don't get to kick ass as much. So getting to do like I'm trained in stunts and weapons and stuff like that. Not I'm not like an expert, but I have like training. And getting to use a lot of that for Tinker was just like so exciting. I was like, finally, I'm not just getting beat up. I get to do stuff. So I was like so excited to be able to talk about it and promote it and like being someone who is like, I don't know, nerd culture occasionally gets like a negative rap, but like that, like the idea of being a part of like that whole tabletop games and video games and stuff throughout my life, like I was like stoked to be on a video game based show. Um, and then, as we were out there with the writers, and it became more and more likely that it was going to be us too. Um, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to talk about this when it comes out. And I started to prepare myself for it. I was like, okay, this is gonna happen and I can't talk about it. So when the show dropped and I was just like kind of reaching out to my friends privately, being like, by the way, I'm on the show if you want to watch it, because like obviously you want it to do well. I wanted to promote the show, but at the same time, like the things that we were fighting for were incredibly important, and doing that kind of promotion kind is, against exactly what we were looking to solve in that problem, in that atmosphere. So it hurt. It hurt, but at the same time, I was getting messages from people, and like you reaching out, other people reaching out, and recognizing the work even with us having to promote it, which was really nice. And then as soon as we were able to promote it, I was like, I'm Tinker. Like I like jumped in with like an Instagram post immediately, like, by the way, like everybody check this out. So that was nice to be able to do eventually after we got through the fight that we had.
Yeah, for me as I was like kind of starting the podcast and trying to figure out who to follow, very little sources were out there in terms of people's involvement,
Mm-hmm.
and you have your IMDb and articles and stuff, and you try to learn that way. So I'm pretty certain I had already followed your account prior to the show's release, and so I was like, okay, so she has some involvement, and I remember just kind of watching it when you popped up, like your face, like I immediately recognized your face. I was like, there she is. That's like I follow her, so it was exciting, for me to see and to kind of see how your character was kind of well represented and included into the show. I was just like, that makes a lot of sense. Convoy, they're like, the car people, the car folk,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so it just made a lot of sense and the mechanism and all that stuff. I love that. This just popped up, but do you think because like Tigger clearly we'll get into her. I want to kind of keep it low light, but I just had this question because it just occurred to me. It looks like she's pretty tech savvy
Hmm.
as well. Do you think she had a hand in kind of like the
Yeah.
tr
No, sorry.
transforming convoys?
You do a hand putt, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So what she was kind of written as being like the convoy like engineer type. So she creates, makes things like think like Junkrat, like anything that we kind of need, we make, and then obviously like prosthetics. Any type of prosthetic device is going to be a necessity or necessary in this kind of dystopian world, right? Like people are losing limbs and fingers and left and right. So it just became something that, take what they have and create stuff.
That's awesome. So she's kind of like their I forget which letter it is for James Bond. Is it Q or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Literally like the behind the scenes person who's
yeah.
like making stuff like I have this, I have that. Anybody needs this, I have this one. I don't know if you noticed, but like there's so many cool costume and hair choices and makeup choices. Like I have screwdrivers in my hair. I have like just to be able to work on things at any and all time. I have like all this stuff to be able to kind of imply that she is kind of like that engineer type.
Swiss Army knife of sorts as
Yes,
well. Yeah.
exactly. We
Th-
talked about a Swiss Army arm at one point, so I was
Oh,
like, I
interesting.
can get on it if you guys want me to have this made. Like, but originally I was only just how they roll out the episodes. When I first got the role of Tinker, it was only for that one episode.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and then, as the writers kind of worked through the story and what they wanted and what they were imagining, I think they were like, Tinker could be around more. I haven't
I
really
think
talked
so.
to MJ or anybody exactly about how that went down, but yeah, it started with just me being around for that. And then, it kind of maybe because of the relationship with the Watts and Amber and stuff like that, of like how we kind of bonded on set, especially as characters and actors. Um, I think maybe that kind of led to that as well. But who knows? I'm happy to be there.
Yeah, I believe, let me see, because we don't see her return until episode 9, if I'm not mistaken. And
Hmm.
I believe that was written by Grant and Becca. I'm still trying to I'm still learning names and trying to put names with faces as well. And as I'm going back and rewatching some of these episodes, I'm like, man, like I'm glad that it's gotten a lot of recognition. And recently it appeared on Paramount Plus UK,
Right.
so getting more fans. And so the fandom is there, but I think a lot of us are still trying to figure each other out there, like on X and on Instagram. So it's been fun still. But now okay, so s- like a lot of people, I need to be educated and with terms and what does this term actually categorize in terms of like these type of people and stuff.
Mhm.
So like growing up as a kid, somebody that was different to me, I understood them to be handicapped,
Right.
right? So what is that a term that we are still able to use? Can you help educate the simpletons like me?
Right. I wouldn't call you that, but 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 yeah, I hear what you're saying. So it's really interesting because terminology changes, right, throughout the
Yes,
years. A lot of the terminology was determined by people that weren't actually the ones that were referred that way, right? So
right.
it's not like we really picked, no one got together in like a caucus and was like, this is what we want to be called. So handicapped, I think, is a word that people use a lot less.
Yeah,
Obviously there is, I also do a lot of consulting on productions, right? There is no one size fits all thing because we're all different people, right? So
right.
the safest thing to do a lot of times is just ask people what they want to be referred to as, or specifically refer to whatever their physical difference is, disability. I use the term disability. Most people I know use the term disability. It's kind of like one of those words that, with the ADA, with the Americans with Disability Act, that won us so many things that we fought hard for, that it's kind of like, I think we've all been told that disability is a bad word. You hear that and people want to go, "You're not disabled." And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
"But I am." Like like the world wasn't built for how my body looks and exists, and like it's not designed around me, and my surroundings are the reason. Like if everything was designed for one-handed people or for people who are wheelchair users, then the world would be fine for them, but they are disabled by that kind of thing. And or if they have like pain disorders or chronic pain, they're disabled by that. Like that happens. So disability is not a bad word, but there are people who still don't like that word. So
Hmm.
it's kind of just making sure you're like, what do you want to be called? Like if you're referring it to that way, you could also just call them their name.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
but same thing with like parking spaces. Like I don't usually say handicap parking spaces. I'll say like accessible spaces, or like
Mm.
it's for access. Like the whole point is so they can have an accessible space. Which, if I want to get on my little soapbox real quick, don't put your carts in those little lines. Put them that people can't get out of their cars. There's going to be a ramp that comes down. Don't leave your cart there. Don't put your motorcycle there. Like don't park too close to the lines. They literally can't get a ramp out of the car. I think
Right.
there's just it's not even people's fault. There's just not enough education out there for like why these things exist. And even just basic terminology isn't even spoken about enough, which is why I think in film and television it's so important to have different characters that look different and exist with different bodies, because then you get to just like observe it and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense, rather
Yeah.
than like getting a lesson about something.
Right. It's yeah, as a father, I'm always looking to educate my
Mm-hmm.
kids, and
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure that being like Asian American is I don't want to like downplay or overplay like what it is for us, but they're not going to have it as easy. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And so I'm always trying to make sure that there's not going to be anything else that
Mm-hmm.
gives, kind of gives them any extra attention that's not necessarily needed. But it's just one of the things like I do remember like walking through the parking lot one day and I overheard like this couple, and someone just kind of said, "It's not like they're gonna have that many handicaps in the store at one time. Like, why do they need all these spaces?" I'm just like, "Who are you to dictate how many spaces?"
Just to let you know,
But,
1 in 4 in the United States have a physical disability.
yeah.
So
See, well,
it's
there you go.
actually a lot more people in the store have a disability than you think they do. And
Yeah,
a lot of people have so much stigma attached to it. They don't want to say they're disabled, or they don't want to use the cart in the store because there's so much stigma attached to it. Like how many people don't want to use those little electric scooters that probably should? Like how many people are walking around going like my knees hurt? I like you could be though. Like but
yeah.
everyone thinks of people in a negative way if they're using any type of accessibility stuff. They want to like say I can do it myself, and it's like, yeah, but you don't have to.
I think
Like
there's also kind of like maybe there's some people that are like, well, you don't look disabled enough to be using that. You need to leave that for somebody that
we don't
would
need the
need it.
disability police out here. Listen, like I understand a lot of times people are well intentioned, um, right? Like when they see somebody park in an accessible space and they say something like, "You're not disabled." Like, do you know how often that's happened to my friends who are high level amputees of like legs, and they have to like lift up their like their pant leg to show that person, and they're like, "Yeah, but you're not. Well, you can walk okay," and it's like, who are you? like,
Yeah,
like who gets to determine this? And like I would rather somebody abuse the system than somebody is not able to utilize the system that could help them, like, and
yeah.
unfortunately, like I think we operate in a little bit of different way. Like I think Disneyland just like or Disney World just like revoked how they do disability access because they said too many people were taking advantage of it. And it's like, okay, so wait, now you now you made all the disabled people unable to use the system
Yeah.
designed for them. I'm confused.
That sounds familiar. That's recent memory.
Yeah, this just happened like last week.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay, I
they
thought it was a little bit.
reformatted the system again. Yeah, no, it's happened before, but they did it
Okay.
again, and they made it like very hard to utilize the system for anyone,
Yeah,
even wheelchair users. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure what's gonna happen. Like
that is
I don't.
wild.
But yeah,
You
it's one
see,
of those things where like people want I are well intentioned in you know thinking that they're sticking up for people, but some of the time it's just like I've had friends who are recent amputees or whatever, or even other disabilities that are less visible, and they come back to like a really mean note on their car and they're actually having like a really bad day, and they usually don't need to park in an accessible spot, but today was a really bad day for pain, for they just went to physical therapy and they were having a hard time, or they were carrying something really huge out of the store and they don't normally utilize that spot but they did today, and then all of a sudden they got chewed out for it by some random. Like it's kind of like, I don't know. I understand they're well intentioned, but a lot of times it's just like, I don't know how you can be 100% sure. Like, and if you're not, you're never going to be, then like I don't see the point in it.
Yeah.
It's
eh,
kind of just like I, I don't know. It's that's a hard topic, but I
Right.
think more so when you're talking about like talking to your kids or things like that, growing up as a person with one hand, which I don't know if we really, I mean, if you've seen the show, you know, I have one hand, although surprisingly enough, after all the work that I've done, you know, on different shows, I still see comments like, oh, she really has one arm. Because we very rarely do cast actors who actually wear prosthetic devices or amputees. We usually kind of green screen or do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think the big thing is when I'm like in a store or somewhere and I hear like a kid be like, Mom or Dad, like, what's on her arm or what happened to her arm or what is that? And I think a lot of times, like, the parent's first response is probably panic, right? Like, I thought I had more time to have this conversation, right? Like, oh no, I should have brought this up before, you know, they're quick thinking. And then they're worried about upsetting me or some, like, you know, or making a big fuss. So they usually look at the kid and they shush them. That's like the main move I usually see is just like don't. And they're kind of pulling them away.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is you just made pointing me out in my difference like a bad thing, right? Like you shushed them, you kind of made them feel like they did something wrong, which makes them seeing me scary. Or like they know that they got fussed at the last time they brought it up. And like, what do you not talk about? Bad things, right? So if you're not
Right.
willing to talk about it or have that conversation in the moment because you haven't prepared yourself for it, I mean, it's really hard as a parent, I'm sure, to like prepare yourself for all the moments you're about to have.
Right.
But the idea would just be like, I think my favorite thing I ever heard a lady say, I was like, she was behind me in line and I was ready to turn around and do my whole, like, oh, I was born without my arm. Do you want to see my prosthesis? Right? Because you just become that when I was born without my arm, right? So I've just done that my whole life and I was ready. And I heard the mom go, I don't know. Some people just look different and that's fine. And the kid went, okay. Like, and it was like as easy as that. Now I'm sure there were plenty of kids that are like, why, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like it's just like why, and it's like, well, you look different, right? Or you do this. Like it's just kind of making sure that everybody understands like there is no normal quote unquote way to look, right? Like everybody does look different, and that's kind of the point. We don't all want to look the same, and having,
Absolutely.
yeah, like a physical difference is like kind of just reminding everybody like some people use wheelchairs to get around, some people have a prosthesis, some people don't have an arm at all, like, and that's
Yeah.
fine, like they just exist that way.
And you started wearing your first prosthesis at 4?
No, actually,
No.
I'm the youngest in the world to wear what's called a myoelectric prosthesis. So that means that I operate the arm using my muscles. So early gen bionic arms, what we call bionic arms now. If I want to be, if this was a different podcast, I'd probably get into the science of it. But because I do a lot of talk about tech, and that's the term people we love saying bionic, but like it's kind of like a catch-all word.
So
So
what's a cyborg?
yeah. So I always joke around that I'm a cyborg, and I think it's just a person who's integrated with technology. So even someone who has a cochlear implant, like you rely on tech as part of your body. You have it integrated. I have actually like chips in my actual hand. I have like RFID chips and yeah, different kinds of things that I've done from just like conferences on technology where someone's been like, you should try this, and I can like unlock a door and
Oh,
different things that I
okay.
could utilize it for. So, um, but yeah, like so I was 4 months, 10 days old, so 4 months old when I got my first myoelectric. So I was
Four
able to,
months, not 4 years. Yeah, okay.
yeah. So when I was 6 weeks when I got my first what's called like a passive device. So my parents didn't know I was going to be born without my arm. Just didn't show up in the ultrasound that way. Shadow, no one really had the expectation. Um, didn't do like a 4D ultrasound or anything like that. And so when I was born, my mom happened to be a nurse. and she had seen a program on television that week that was talking about the first myoelectric prosthetic devices that were being brought into the US for children and babies, because these all things were developed in like Germany and Austria, and they had been there for years, and they had existed for adults in the States, but we hadn't had any like tiny versions, right? Because that's the hard part, is just making it smaller and smaller. They always want to make new versions of stuff, but nobody wants to make it smaller. It's been my issue my entire life with prosthetic devices, even on top of that. But yeah, so my mom watched this program, not knowing that I had one arm in her belly. And she cried through the whole thing. That's so beautiful. They're giving babies arms. I love it. Right. She's a pregnant woman. Um, and then a month later, I was born. And she'd literally just given birth. And the doctors are looking at her and my dad. And they're like, she has one arm. Like, we checked everything else out. They kind of rushed me out of the room. No one got to see what was quote unquote wrong with me, kind of thing. They just knew something wasn't what they expected. And my dad was panicking and my mom was panicking, and they brought me back in. They're like, we checked all of her other stuff, you know, organs, all that. Everything's good. She just doesn't have an arm. And my dad, of course, was upset. And then my mom, on the other hand, went, oh, okay, you know, there's a tiny robot baby arm I saw, and we're gonna get her that. And the doctors were like, we gave her too many drugs. Like, they had no idea what she was, so new. They had no idea what she was talking about. Like, not a clue. And she was like, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. That's the type of person my mom is, just like a total badass. So from that moment on, she was like on a mission to find where this place was. There was that one place in the entire US. It was in Houston, Texas, and I'm from Louisiana. So it just happened to be 4 hours away in a car from us. So they called, like my mom called and was like, you know, my baby was born without an arm. And they said, oh, great, we'll send you some information. And she was like, oh, no, no, we're on our way. Like, she just showed up. And because it had just been a month since that program had aired, there was, my mom was like, it's filled with kids and parents and this, everybody really interested. So it was a really interesting environment and atmosphere. And because I started so early, they were able to fit me at 6 weeks to get that first passive, so I could get used to the weight and distribution. If you think you're that old, you really only do like, you know, grasping kind of maneuvers. You're not grabbing anything yet. So I got used to all that, and then they started my training, which sounds like I'm like a Jedi, but they started my training, and they
Yeah.
had like these. At the time, it was only one electrode. Now I have many, and I have different movements I can do and change grips and, you know, do fun stuff with my arm. But at the time, it was just one electrode that allowed the hand to go open close. So I couldn't control how opened or how closed. It was just open close, and they had it hooked up to a little race car. So every time I flexed that right muscle that would allow me to move, the race car would move. So
Oh,
as a
nice.
baby, that was rewarding, right? When I figured out, so when they thought I could control that race car, they started putting the arm on me at like 4 months. And every day they'd like put it on me, and everybody would wait. And usually I would just cry, right? Because I had no idea what was going on, and everybody was staring at me, and I'm a baby. But at
Right.
4 months, 10 days, they put it on me, and I moved it. And then, you know, they kind of, nobody said anything, right? They're like watching me. And then they trying to figure out if I understood that I moved it. So I moved the arm. And then I reached down and picked up a toy and just put it in my mouth. And then like everybody screamed and they were all so excited. And then I cried because
Yeah.
everybody yelled. But that's the moment that it was considered like 4 months, 10 days that I understood how the arm worked. And I wore it since then. I've upgraded with every technology and throughout my life of different kinds. I actually have a whole bunch of arms sitting around me if you want to see them. But I've had various types throughout my life and been able to like change them out. And I really love cosplay and then like customization of the devices. Like once I started to realize they didn't have to look like skin color, I was like, why am I not doing cool shit?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Like I saw one of your I believe it was an attachment called like the dragon.
yeah, yeah, my martial arts detachment.
Yeah, so there's some really cool stuff that I saw. But also I was just kind of thinking about this, but like your prosthesis, it's a left, it's your left arm.
Mhm.
So it do you are you a left hand or right hand dominant kind of person?
This is a fun question. So,
Okay.
in the congenital community of people who have congenital limb differences, there is a thought that you're missing what you think would have been your dominant hand. It's there's no research behind it. This is all just like us chatting to each other. As someone who has my master's in psychology, I want to do a full-fledged research on this, obviously at some point. But I think I'm supposed to be left-handed. My dad's
Okay.
left-handed. My grandpa was left-handed. My brother's ambidextrous. So, and when they did my handed tests when I was a baby, I would predominantly use my prosthesis for picking up things and do, like I said, I picked it up and put it in my mouth
Right.
until I couldn't anymore because think that arm only did this, right?
Right.
Once I got into fine motor stuff, they said I would just cry because I couldn't get my arm to do what I wanted. Also, I have terrible handwriting. It's obviously gotten better, but like my handwriting is like if I don't try really hard, it just looks like chicken scratch. So
And you
maybe.
it was a video was from a few years ago, but I remember you mentioning in a video that you had just gotten a hand that you were able to like use your iPhone with. That
Yeah,
we
yeah.
hadn't thought about that before. Could you talk about that one?
Yeah, so that was the B Bionic. So that was the first small size multi-articulating hand. So within the technology realm, right? Like I said, that one hand only had that one grip pattern, right? So the open and close. By the time I turned like 7, tech didn't happen very fast when I was young. By the time I turned 7, I then had the ability to do with that size hand different increments of open or close without crushing things, right? I could actually control how open and how closed it was. I had to practice on myself a lot. It'd be a lot of me screaming in class, a lot of kids being like, shake my hand, and I'd like crush it. Crush a lot of cans for fun. It's my fun party trick. But so that's a single articulation hand, right? It is just in that shape. It's the one that most people have probably seen. And then 2008 was when the first multi-articulating hand came out, a company called iLim, and it was massive. Well, because technically most upper limb amputees are men who are typically of bigger stature. So when they think about how they make these arms, statistically, they're like, who's our market, right? This isn't altruistic always. Unfortunately, it's like, who are we going to be selling these to? And like, it's bigger people. Um, Same thing with a lot of these things were sponsored by military and government. So a lot of their participant pool was
Right.
people of bigger stature and men. Um, so I wanted this multi-articulating hand so bad, and I got it. It's actually downstairs still. It's that old one, and it's huge. And I like look like I was wearing like a Hellboy, like I look like Hellboy, like boxing glove style. But it was so cool to be able to do the different grips, but had no like touch capacity, like capacitive touch, like to anything. Also weighed a ton. Like if I was holding my arms out in front of me, it was like I was holding a dumbbell. So it was fine, but it just really wasn't very I don't know, intuitive for like my day and my size of being a person. Like, and also I was like, you know, very conscious of how I looked as like a girl at that time. And I was like people are pointing it out. So then I kind of leaned back into some of the other more cosmetic arms that I think I had a whole experience of that, of seeing how people treated me when they thought I had two arms and then realized I had one arm, and then like the difference in it, especially like, I don't know, people trying to like date me and stuff like that. I was always like, whoa, now that you know, you're being weird. um, but but yeah, so when I got that hand, so that was the B Bionic, came out in 2015, the small size. That was, so literally from 2008 to 2015 before a true small size hand could come out. So one that fit women or people of smaller stature. Like there was no multi-articulating hand.
Yeah.
So I was really excited to be able to use that one. And like I had that hand, this is right in front of me. I had that hand for years and I loved it. It was, something I wore constantly. And then I just got a new hand literally 6 months ago, that I've been so excited. It just came out on the market. It's called the Tasca. So that's the one I'm wearing now, which is also a small size hand, but has had a lot more updates to it. Unfortunately, the B Bionic, as much as I love it, just hasn't had a lot of updates since then. A lot because it's been changing hands, through different companies have bought it, and I don't think it's really gotten the time to be able to make those adjustments. Great product. But yeah, I switched over to this hand, and this one's not only touch capacitive but waterproof. I can
Okay.
do custom grips. So like I have an app and I could go through and like make grips.
Nice.
So
Okay.
it's really fun. When I think about if I would have had this one on Twisted Metal, we could have done a lot of really fun gags with it. But the Be Bionic didn't have the capability of doing that at the time, which is what I had when we shot.
Yeah.
So,
So you could do like live long and prosper through the
oh, I could
app
do
or something.
anything. I
Yeah.
can do anything.
That's
I
awesome.
can like, so the app literally has like a hand and I can like set different
Oh,
degrees of whatever. So I can, now I don't have splay. That's the one thing a lot of these devices don't have. Is like they'll splay a little bit, but that's when your fingers move apart, right? So like a lot of them will do it within a grip. They'll have a little bit of splay, but I can't just go like that. So
right. S-
so
So
that one might not be, that one might be less likely.
the so it's been 9 years since the bionic
Be bionic.
B bionic. I knew there was two B's in there. Okay,
Yeah, right.
been 9 years. Like how far have they come from that one to the one that you're wearing now? Like
Yeah, I mean, so this one has a powered thumb. So if you see like the thumb will move on its own based off of the muscle triggers that I'm giving it. The Be Bionic has to manually be moved for the thumb. I did a show called Snowpiercer.
yes,
And in Snowpiercer, I'm teaching a new prosthesis user how to use their device. And the Be Bionic at the time, like they were trying the device I was getting from director and writer were trying to get me to do certain things with my hand. And I was like, oh, my hand can't do that. We can cheat it or fake it all we want, but you can't physically do that yet, unfortunately. I know it looks really cool, but I didn't have that capability. But if this was now, I would have been able to do that for sure. Everything that they were asking for, I would have been able to do it, which is like, as an actor, when I saw this hand come out, I was like, well, as a person who has one hand, but also as an actor, I was like, I would have been able to do the thing in the shot. Like, for me, and then it being waterproof is amazing. I'm from Louisiana, it rains all the time. And I'm like, okay, I can, and it's not waterproof all the way up because obviously the sensors still need to touch my skin to
right,
have any type of reaction. But like I can wash my hands now, I can get caught in a rainstorm, like that kind of thing. So it kind of makes my day a lot easier and a lot less worry. Um,
right.
a
Does
lot more things.
does the humidity does that affect it at all?
The humidity doesn't as much affect the physical hand, the humidity affects the socket. So any high degree of anything, so like obviously for tech, as we know with iPhones and anything, right? Like the moderate is always best, right? Too hot, too cold is usually bad for anything. So if it's really cold outside, I have a hard time getting conductivity with my electrodes in my skin because of
Right,
dryness and things like that. So it's hard to control my arm. But also on the other side of it, if it's really humid or I'm hot and sweaty or anything like that, also really hard to get conductivity. So like it's like a polar kind of thing. It's like right in the middle is where I want it to be, but very few places allow it to be like that.
that's amazing. Oh my gosh, yeah, there's just so many things. So where did the your love for cosplay begin?
Mm.
Because I've seen some of the characters that you've dressed up as. There's the one movie Battle.
Alita Battle Angel.
Yes,
Yeah,
that one.
that was really fun. I
Um,
got to do that with IGN. They like kind of sponsor that and help me do that one, which was great because that would have been an expensive cosplay.
I think that they flew you to LA for that and everything, right? To
Yeah, I
do all
got
the
to do.
makeup. So
Yep.
yeah, I believe that was their account that shared that video. So yeah, can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, that was great. I I think I'm from New Orleans, right? So like I've loved dressing up. I've had one arm my whole life, so I'm like used to people staring at me. I like costumes. Any excuse to dress up, I think, is a New Orleans thing, right? We all have like a costume closet somewhere that we're like, just in case, like sequins and fringe and stuff. You're like, because you have Mardi Gras and things like that. So I've grown up just wanting to dress up and do that kind of stuff. I think it's fun. Loved Halloween. Worked at a haunted house for years, right? Cutting off my arm and playing characters and doing stuff like that, which I thought was fun. And then I think the first time I saw a character that was an amputee that I thought was cool. I remember thinking I could dress up as that, and it was Planet Terror,
Oh, that's right.
the Rose McGowan, the leg. It was a leg. It was her leg though, and she had a machine gun leg, and I was like, I could make that an arm, and that was the very first time I dressed up as a character that had to do with my limb difference and kind of like cosplayed it. It was for Halloween, so it was a little bit different. The first time I did true cosplay for like a con was I did Evil Dead, and I did the chainsaw arm and all that.
I see that. I'm trying to think because I saw a lot of your videos. I saw a lot of, like I said, appearances and clips and
There's
going
too
through the
much. There's
gram.
too many things
There,
to go through. I totally
there's
understand.
well, I don't want to say too much, but there's a wealth of it, and it's just very fascinating. I had planned to open up saying like you are like one of the most fascinating people that I'm like getting the opportunity to speak with. You know, just from everything that
I
you've
appreciate that.
yeah that you've done. Just like I was just like the stories that
You want a
all people
fun
hear.
Bruce Campbell story? And you want that?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I was also randomly given the opportunity to be on Ripley's Believe It or Not. I still don't understand what the Believe It or Not is. She has one arm. She was a robot baby. I don't know. I'm not sure. Whatever it was, I'll take it.
It's a good
Um,
question.
yeah, I was like, sure. What this sounds fun. They came out to my house. We talked about my arm. It was good. But I got the opportunity to do their panel then at Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, and Bruce was the host of the show. He was not. He didn't do like my segment because obviously he does like the VO and does all the talking. Right? He's the host. He's not physically meeting everybody. But I got to
Okay.
meet him because of him hosting the Comic Con panel. And so of course everybody was like, "Did you see your cosplay?" This, and he was very nice. It was like cool. But we go to get on stage, and I'm telling you, like 2 seconds before we walk on, he looks at me and he's like, "I'm gonna shake your hand, and I'm gonna pretend that it gets stuck." And then he just walks away. And I was like, "What? Wait! Like, there's so much that needs to be worked out here. Like, this is not like what kind of happens on set sometimes too, when they're like, Angel, do that with your arm, and then they're like, all right, action. I'm like, wait, I need to practice that. I don't know I can't feel my hand. like, I have no, unfortunately, we're not there yet in the haptic feedback realm. So like, I don't know how hard I'm grabbing things. I don't know how it's going to look. I'm not a two-handed person. So a lot of times you'll see me going, does this look like how a two-handed person would do this?
Right.
Just like trying to make it work.
Does
And
this
so
look
he just
natural?
yeah, does this literally a lot of times I'm just like, is this right? Like I'm just like holding my hands in front of my face. When I cross my arms on camera every time, I'm like, is this good? Or is that
Right, right.
is this how you guys look? Or
I see you guys pose this way. Is that right?
yeah,
Do I
is this
put the
is
one
this how
hand
you
on the
do it?
chin? Is that
Yeah.
the
Oh, that's a hard one too. The
yeah,
one anything on my face is hard. But yeah, so I walk out on stage in front of this is a huge room, huge
yeah,
room, one of the
yeah.
big rooms at Comic Con, and he goes to do it, and in my head I'm like, oh god, and it was the B Bionic at the time, so it even less capabilities than I have now. And like I remember he goes to shake my hand, and he shook, and then he acted like it got stuck, so he kind of pulled against me. And the problem with that is then my electrodes kind of shifted where they were sitting, which where they're sitting is incredibly important on how I move my hand. And so I got stuck literally. So he was making the joke that I got stuck and crushed his hand, and then I couldn't let go. And so then he was like, ah, and the crowd's laughing, and then he looks at me and he's like, and I haven't let go, and he's like, let go, and I was like, I'm trying. I was like, just eyes straight eye contact, just laughing. I'm like, oh, I mean, I'm doing my best. Like, like we're together now, and I kind of had to wait for like the movement to stop for me like to let go, and then he was like making the joke, but then in my head the whole time I was like, oh my god, I crushed his hand. Like,
Yeah.
I got
I
him
get it.
good.
Well, yeah, that's a lot to yeah, people they don't think about it, right? And so that's amazing that you're out there kind of like yeah, educating people and speaking and the more you're out there the more content there is to consume for anybody, and I think that can spread absolutely. And just like the different types of people that I would see you speaking with, um, you know, they're not all just necessarily like a host of like a channel or whatever, but there's
Hmm.
just you know the camera's following you and you're there for a very specific purpose. The you were talking about the like the cosplay, like I literally teared up when it flashed to you and like a bunch of kids who
Mm,
are like touching your hand and stuff like
yeah,
that. And it's just like it's just like, oh God, the kids, you know, the babies, you know, like
right.
there's still hope.
Right. And
You
that's
know?
that's why I do talk to, there are days, right, where I just want to go to the grocery store and I hear like, "Whoa, that's so cool." And I'm like, "Don't turn around, don't turn around, don't turn." And I'm like, "That's so cool." And they keep saying it and I'm like, "Oh, hi." Like, and I have the talk and I'm like, "Man, I just wanted to get milk," like, But for the most part, like I'm fine with it. I've done it my whole life. Now, I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't want to do that, and I totally get it, and that's fair. Like, you're like, hey, I just want to exist as a human. But I think of like every time that I have that conversation with people, then now it's normal. And that conversation will not need to happen as much or again because they already know. So they don't need to ask every person they see, kind of thing. And like,
Yeah,
that's the whole point is we're trying to make people aware of it. But I love talking to adults and I love talking to kids. Kids are great because sometimes they're mean, right? They don't know. They only know what
right.
they know. They only know what
Yeah,
they've seen and heard and, maybe gotten shushed or whatever. I got a lot of kids going, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I'm okay. Especially now that my arm looks cool, right? Like, I have lights in it and I can change out the covers and I do all this stuff. I think kids, I remember this is one of my favorite stories. The first time I wore the Be Bionic out in public, that was like my multi-articulating hand that didn't have the glove. Before that, they all had some kind of fleshy
yeah,
colored
fleshly,
glove
yeah,
over them. That was just how they existed. I
yeah,
guess the people designing them were the assumption that we all just wanted to try blend in as much as possible, which is understandable because like the world hadn't been very nice to people who looked different. But it got to a point where we were kind of all just like, who are we fooling? Like it was the, like everybody knows, and when you wear that, it also makes you look, from a psychology standpoint, right? It makes you look like you're uncomfortable or you think something's wrong if you're hiding it. So it kind of just was like, well, I know, they know, I know, we all, I know, they know that I know, we all know. So that's kind of like where it sits at when you wear something that looks like this. So the first time I was out, it was probably a great choice of where I went. We went to Best Buy and I was in we were looking at video games, or systems, we were looking at consoles. And I remember this kid was staring at me and I was kind of like trying to figure it out. I love to do this thing where I kind of like move my arm slowly behind me to see if they're looking. And then I'll like watch people's faces and then they have to look up because they realize. And I'm always like, hey, you could ask me about it. But this kid was looking at me and his brother comes over and he was like, stop staring. And he was like, she's like Iron Man. And that was the first time I heard like a positive thing said. Usually it was always like, what's wrong with her arm? Or why is it like that? Maybe not even negative, like, why is it like that? Or what is that? Just like a neutral. This one was like, she's like Iron Man. And I remember just being like, whoa, like the framing of what they thought about my arm was like totally different. And that comes from representation, right? That comes from the
right.
fact that that character exists being a badass. Um, so that was sick.
Yeah,
That kind of made me be like, all right, how cool can I make my arm? How close to Iron Man can I get? Winter Soldier, like where are we at?
that's right. Yeah,
I've
yeah.
done a Winter Soldier, yeah.
Um, that's really cool. You were kind of mentioning kids, so like, what kind of memories do you have like in like elementary school, middle school? Because like by then you it's become so much a part of you, and it's not. I mean, I don't know the struggles you were kind of going through around that time, but um, can you share like any memories? Like, was there constant bullying because of the difference? And
Mhm.
because I feel some of these videos where you are the center focus, there were also like pictures of your family life and pictures of you at school
Mhm.
as little girl and stuff. So can you kind of share some of those memories?
Yeah, so um, my mom gave me a healthy amount of confidence in the fact that my arm was cool, my little arm and my prosthesis. So she did something that I found out later on that not a lot of my limb different friends' parents did, which limb difference is typically what you would refer to as somebody who has a limb difference that's not an amputee, right? I was
Okay.
born this way, so my limb looks different. I have a limb difference, congenital limb difference, congenital limb abnormality. Like those are like the science words. But limb difference is like a catch-all, and you're not wrong if they're an amputee. And if they want to say they're an amputee, then they can kind of further into that, if we're talking about terms that are easy to go to.
Yeah.
Um, so my mom was always just kind of like, "You're different. Different's awesome." Like my mom was very good at being like, "Everybody's different. That's the point. Like who do you see that looks the same? Like we shouldn't." So I would run into a room like, "Who wants to see my arm?" And I would like pull it off and like kids would just run. Like like I scared the crap out of everyone because I just was like, hey, I think this is awesome. You should also think this is awesome. And I found out that not everybody was taught what I was taught about be different, being cool, and if they were, maybe not as excitedly as I was taught. A
Yeah,
lot of my Limb Different Friends' parents kind of did the thing, which I think they thought was best, which makes sense. Like being a parent is just a person who has a kid, right? So you're just doing whatever you think is right. So uh, they were taught like, oh, you're just like everyone else. You can do everything that everyone else can do.
right.
Well, one, we're not. We're not just like everyone else, and we're going to realize that at some point, probably when kids point it out. And then we're going to think, why did you tell us we were? Because now I have to deal with them pointing it out and thinking it's bad. And then also, I can't do everything that everyone else can, at least in the way that they do it. You know, like I'm going to probably find my own way to do it, but that's kind of how everybody does stuff, right? Like you think about it, like we don't all do things exactly the same. Um, and you know what? If I can't do something, like that's not the worst thing in the world. Not everybody can do things, right? Some people just can't swim, and they have
Right.
all their limbs, right? Like it's
Yeah,
just like, oh, I
yeah,
can't swim, like, or that kind of thing. And we think that's fine, but for some reason, when it comes to disability, like we think like, oh, but they can't do that, and it's like, well, lots of people can't do stuff, like,
yeah.
but we're okay with it. It's framing, right? Um,
Sure. You
so
you could do more than the average person. Like I've seen, like I said, I've seen a lot of your videos. You are, I mean, I don't know what the correct term is, but I saw you do archery,
I
you
do,
know?
yeah, I do recurve
Y-
archery.
Yeah, so it's like not a lot of people could do that with two
Right.
limbs, you
Which
know?
is funny because you'll hear a lot of people go, wow, imagine what she could do if she had two hands. And I'm like, if I had two hands, maybe I wouldn't want to do any of these things.
Right.
You know, like that's not even the point here. And sometimes it is kind of undercutting my accomplishments, like when you say stuff like that. Like it's kind of like, well, I do these things and I have one hand, like, and that's what it is. And if I had two
Yeah.
hands, maybe I just want to play video games all day. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and I do have
And you
friends
were
who play video games who have one hand as well, so it's not like you can't do that either.
right, and you were just sharing that like you can't feel that arm, and so
No.
like I can't even imagine the process of aiming and then regulating your breathing
Oh
and
yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
know and all of that, and like so I was in the army and like so I kind of know how to shoot a rifle. Like I'm a pretty good
Yeah.
shot, you
Yeah.
know, and so like archery that's so foreign to me,
Hmm.
and to see you do it, I was just like, hey, that's fucking awesome. Like what else? What else? Like you know, was she
I'm
able to
also
kind
rifle
of
trained. I'm also handgun trained. I'm
yeah,
also
yeah.
like, yeah, all those things, which
I saw the kickboxing stuff too.
yeah, which all those things, it's like you're learning, but you're learning in a way like that isn't how most people are taught. Like it's really funny watching drills of people doing one-handed or off-handed reloads and things like that. And I think I had a friend who's an actor the other day that did a tactical class, and she posted her offhand things where she was only using one hand, right, and doing all of it. And I was like, one-handed, and I like put a bunch of fire emojis, and the company responded back and was like, well, we call it offhanded, blah blah blah, and they didn't realize that I had one hand and that I was like trained in this. And it was really funny. My actor friend immediately commented back like, Angel, I'm sure Angel can do this much better than I can. That kind of stuff. And it's just, it's fun to think about because like I try to tell people this a lot. Disabled people in general, limb different people, we kind of come with like a resume worthy problem solving skills because every situation we go into isn't designed for our bodies. Every single thing throughout the day, right, is not really made for me. So I have to be like, even getting like water out of a water cooler, opening a refrigerator door. Some of them I'm like, well, I don't, if my hand's full and there's no handle, the ones that you have to go underneath, like, how am I going to get this open? It's just really, it's one of those things where your brain just has to work different because you've been problem solving your whole life, especially if
Right.
you're born that way.
Yeah.
So, but oh, with kids, so kids growing up, uh, I went to private Catholic school, so I had the same kids around me pretty much my entire life. And a little bit lucky, a little bit once I got to college, rough, right? Because I did go through the teasing, right? A lot of them probably don't even remember. Some of my best friends, like later on, like I could talk about right now, thinking about how they were mean to me, and I remember I got called a one-armed girl. Like that was really clever.
Huh.
People were afraid of my arm. It probably didn't help that I would like chase them around with it and try to hit them. If you ever see like any of my like Reddit threads that went like viral, people would always be like, "I remember this girl. She hit me with her arm." I always want to be like, you probably deserved it because I only hit bullies. Like I was like a vigilante arm hitter. Like if you made fun of people or me, I would just like rip off my arm and like swing it at you like a bat. Um, that was
I
that
I
that was
worked
my
with
move.
I worked with a guy who he never had a prosthesis, but he I forget which arm he did not have, but it was at the movie theater, and he worked a ticket booth, and he was fine. He was able to rip tickets
Yeah,
and everything still, and I do remember, like, if somebody said something to him that he didn't appreciate, he would poke at them with his arm.
dude,
And
it'll hurt too.
yeah,
If he was born that way, we have a bone right at the end of that. That'll kick
yeah,
your ass. Like people don't realize, like that bone is that'll get you.
yeah,
Uh, it's I've used it throughout my life. It is a dangerous tool.
yeah. But I think we had a pretty decent group. I think like I don't recall people like giving him any sort of nicknames or anything like that. He was just part of the
Right.
group. So
Yeah, well, which is
yeah,
great. Like it's one of those things where like so like I grew up around the same people, so eventually that faded away, and like we'd get like a new kid, and they would
right,
kind of maybe want to say something that was like weird, and everyone's like, that's just Angel, you know, or bullying in some capacity, and everyone kind of was just like, no, that's Angel. So like thankfully I had that group built up, and then I got to college, and I got to realize that like not everybody understood that and saw me just as like a person. A lot of people saw my arm first and then thought they had to like I don't know like baby glove me. Like there was just like a lot of people being like, oh, like they'd realize I had one arm or like notice or ask. Oh, I had a professor one time, I had my arm off on my desk, and it was this one, it was my I had a cosmetic arm at the time because I was waiting for the my
okay,
electric arms to get smaller because I couldn't wear it the whole day around campus, it was so heavy. um he saw it on my desk, didn't notice that I had one arm, like didn't notice my little arm. And it was hot, really sweaty. That's why I had it off. Louisiana, summer, like hot. And he was just one of those teachers that always wanted to give people a hard time, right? Social psychology teacher. He loved just messing with people, which is funny because I love social psych, but I did not like the way he did it. And he picked up my arm in front of the entire class. He just like was walking past my desk and he was like, "What is this?" Had no idea. And I was like, that's my arm. And he like realized his whole face just like drained and he was like, oh, okay. And then just like set it down and walked away. Like the whole class was just like just unreal. So it's like one of those things of just like all of a sudden being thrown into a world where like I kind of had this like supportive group of people for a long time and then kind of getting, pushed into the real world of realizing like, oh, I'm like, oh, I have one arm and thinking that's fine. And people be like, oh, but you're still so pretty. I'm like, but what does that have to do with it?
yeah,
Like, just like weird comments like that. Well, you're so brave for being out here. Doing what?
for
What am I doing? Or like you're so
breathing the same air
inspired.
as yours.
Yeah, like I'm so impressed that you're out here. Out outside? Like should I be inside? Like it was just one of those things where like people say stuff and I wanted to be like, did you like think like one step past having that comment? Like is it for me or for you?
Yeah,
Like
right.
there's so many things where like I don't know. I don't think
Formative,
people,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think they get that far of like
yeah,
why they're saying what they're saying. And I know what like, and my mom will always say it because she just has to remind me. She's like, people are well intentioned. I'm like, I know that. Like I absolutely know people would not say it if they didn't, think they were doing something good.
yeah.
But sometimes it's just kind of like reminding me, like I remember this is different because it was a very old woman, but she said something like, she came to me in store and she was like, I just want you to know, like, you're beautiful the way you are. And I wanted to be like, are you telling everyone? Or
Like, yeah.
like, why
Is
did
that
you single out me? Like, you
that's
thought
a Bruno
I,
Mars song?
yeah.
Are you serenading
She's
me? Thank you.
yeah, lovely. Um, like I just didn't get it. Like I was like,
Yeah,
I mean, I did, but like thinking further into it and then finding out the history of like the ugly laws still existed when she was like a young person, right? Disabled
sure.
people weren't supposed to like leave the house and like work and like have jobs and like significant others when this woman was alive. So like it wasn't that long ago. People
Right,
don't
right.
realize that like the ADA has only been around for 30 years, where we could like go to school and like that kind of thing. So uh, having her say that, I get it, but at the same time, it just being out in the real world is like pushing further, going like, oh. right, this is how people see this thing that I have not seen that way my entire life. Occasionally, right? It would creep up or be around, but I was like small community, small town, like everybody kind of knew everybody. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, right, this is something. And that's when I got very much more involved with like the actual limb different community and started making friends. And I have like lots of
Yeah.
people I know that have one arm now. Um, and I didn't then. I didn't know anybody.
Um, so for those that are listening at home, I know a lot of our traffic is actually through the audio podcasts and not the YouTube channel. I would highly recommend, well, subscribe to the YouTube channel, please. But it's just uh some of the things that Angel has been showing. I think you guys can't see it, and I think it's truly fascinating to see some of these things, including like the flesh tone hand that you just
Mhm,
showed. Because like I saw that immediately, I was just thinking of Edward Scissorhands,
mhm.
because that's the hands that he was going to be given to
Right.
replace his scissors. So yeah, I just I'm kind of. Are you able to kind of angle your camera? Like what's all in front of you? I'm kind of curious. You've shown me like 4 or 5 different items.
Yeah, so and it's funny too because this is where I do auditions as well. So like I always bring all my hands up here because like when I
Okay.
audition too, I have to be
Do
like,
you have a flamethrower? Is that
I
are we there
wish
yet?
I had a flamethrower. I could make it. I could totally make it. I have a friend who does like leg prosthetics and he's made some wild stuff.
That just
Most
sounds
of my
so.
stuff is cosplay, so I haven't done like my Furiosa arm though actually had like knives for fingers and was like made of metal. That was like the closest I've had to like a real function. And it functioned. It was like body powered, so I could like open and close the knife fingers based off of
Yeah.
my shoulder movement.
I just saw
Um,
that one today. The picture of you posing with a guy, like
yeah,
another
one of
one
the
of those
war
characters.
boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I have a lot of V Bionics. I have several in different colors because I had, like I said, I had it for a long time. So with insurance, I was able to get multiples. So I have black, white, silver, not in the flesh tone though. This one has a wrist in it, which is really cool. Um, this is one of my older hands. So this is the style that I would have worn with a skin colored glove over it
Okay.
most of my life, which is like this the singles the two sensor open and close, and I can still wear it and I can still use it. They are it's called a QD, a quick disconnect, so it's all the
Oh,
same
I see.
attachment. So if I can get it, hold on, I gotta get a good position. It's gonna be loud in the when I got the Tasca, it kind of changed the way I put on my hand. So I gotta remember how this one works. There we go. Okay. Technical arm difficulties. But yeah, so this
Wow.
one it's actually stronger than the Tasca because it only has one motor, right? Because it only does that one grip, open and close. So it can just really crush the shit out of someone's hand, or it
Yeah.
can, um, that kind of thing. Which like kids growing up always were like, crush my hand. And I was like, okay. And they'd
Do you
scream.
have any arm wrestling stories?
So arm wrestling is hard.
Yeah.
The assumption is it's not your hand, right? It's technically your shoulder. And then on top of
Okay.
that, my little arm is short. So like my arm stops about 2 inches after my elbow. So
Okay.
I don't have a lot of leverage for arm
Yeah.
wrestling. So people will want to arm wrestle, and I'm like, this isn't working the way that you think it's working. When they're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I beat
Yeah.
a
Because
bionic arm, and I'm like, it's not true.
that is more shoulder. You're right. Yeah.
um,
See, just one
or
of those things.
leverage based, right? Like you really need to have this, and because my arm's missing here, it kind of changes the science behind the physics of where the force is coming from. I did
Right.
arm wrestle another prosthesis user at one point, and it was a 3D printed hand, so technically my arm's stronger than his because my arm's not 3D printed. And but he was missing his arm to his wrist, and so he beat me, and
Oh,
then
okay.
tried to say it was because he had a better arm, which is not true. I'm like, if you understood science, we would know this. But it was for the photo. It was for fun. It was for
Yeah.
putting pictures
Yeah.
on Reddit.
Just a
Whatever.
longer arm. That's all.
Yeah,
Just
like
yeah. More
cheater.
leverage.
You have more fleshy arm.
Right. Right.
Your fleshy parts are longer. That's different. But yeah, so I have all these, and then with my newest arm, oh wait, I have the cosmetic arm that I have, which is literally this old, so it's shiny. I haven't got any
Yeah.
new ones in a long time. so it's lost the matte finish. But these are actually done by sticking your sound side or your fleshy side into alginate, similar like how they do when you get your mouth cast for braces.
Okay. Okay.
Stick
Yeah.
your arm in alginate, and they make a mold, scan it, do a reverse mold. So they just flip your hand inside out pretty much. Obviously, they have to change like your palm and your fingerprints because that different things don't transfer. And then they print it in a silicone glove, a really thin silicone glove, and then artists hand paint it to match your other arm. So like they would go through with like this color matching thing, and you see how the tips of your fingers, mine are kind of like pinker. They would
Uh-huh.
look at your nails. Like that's where I learned the word lunula, because like whether you have moons on your fingernails, some people don't have them or they have smaller ones. So
Interesting.
they would go through just like section by section, itty bitty section, and color match, and then they would go through and paint the arm to match my other hand, which is pretty cool if you're looking for that that
Right.
idea. Like the technology involved in that is pretty awesome. Uh, so like you can do that, or you can have like with these, it was just like the really basic PVC gloves that there's like one way it looks with like different finger knuckles and whatever, like basic finger looking wrinkles and hairs or whatever you want, and then probably like a chart of colors. For a long time there was probably like 5 skin colors, and then now there's a lot more, but that kind of thing of like it's all one tone though. And I blew through those as a kid. God, my parents would be like I would rip them up, or they absorbed ink, or I would write on them, get bands to sign them when I went to concerts. My parents were like, "You know these cost money, right?" Like, like I was like, "But I got the band to sign my arm."
Yeah. Yeah,
Also,
and you're gonna keep it forever, so
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
like you're throwing it away.
Oh yeah, I have like in my closet at my house. I have so many of them, but yeah, so like that was like a thing you don't think about as a kid of like how much money my parents are spending on prosthetics. I'm like, why didn't I get a car when I was 16? It's like because my parents were
Right.
getting me a car every year my
Yeah.
entire life.
Basically. What
And,
well, it sounds like, they've come a long way in from making it smaller and uh kind of allowing you to do different things. What is kind of like the next thing that they're kind of working on
mm,
that's going to be very helpful?
yeah, for sure. So like I said, I can't feel my hand, so haptic feedback is is something that's very important to me. Um, we really haven't found a way to do it that is actually beneficial for the user. Like there's been a lot of I like to call them rumble packs, but the idea of having like vibration sensors, like when you grab something and then the harder you grab it, the more it vibrates, and it's like for me, I've tried them and I don't love it. And also after a while, it's almost just you lose that sensation, right? When you think about like when you're holding a rumble pack controller or like a rumble controller, like after a while, you just don't even feel what's happening anymore. Like you're not even noticing that it's doing it.
Yeah.
So it kind of just takes that away. So haptic feedback is something they've been working on for a while, as well as control systems. So like that's one of the things I'm really interested in is better control. So right now, all of the electrodes are surface. So like we said, I can't get it wet. It's affected by temperature and perspiration in the environment, different things like that. So implantable electrodes are kind of where we're going, as well as obviously they've been doing stuff that is neuro. I don't think we're there yet. I worked on a show called Forging the Future, and I did an episode called Cyborg Revolution, where I got to like meet with a lot of scientists and researchers on different things to do with tech, like Johns Hopkins and DARPA stuff, and seeing where
Wow.
we were at. And when it comes to amputees, like we're still only doing research when it was like quadriplegics and things like that, so that we're able to manipulate prosthetic devices with implants that are neurological or like in your brain, right? But they're done in a lab, it's done in controlled environments. They, are not haven't experimented on people who have the rest of their body functioning yet, so we're not sure what kind of impact that'll have. So I think that's a little bit further down the line. I'm more excited about the implants that are going to be in the residual limbs and then set to the muscle areas that we have going on there and being able to utilize that, and it would be less of a gross muscle movement and more of a fine, so very little tiny electrical impulses that it would be able to pick up. It would be really really cool, so I'm excited about that. Just better control with the devices, longer, this is a sounds like a silly thing, but like longer battery life. My arm dies in like 12 hours. I have to charge it every night. Um, that's annoying.
What kind of charger do you use?
Yeah, right. Okay. So you'd think that we'd all be on USB-C chargers at this point, but for most of the hands, they're proprietary. So like you have to, and if you have to replace a charger, it's like $500. So don't lose it or leave it at a hotel. You will not be
Wow.
able to go to a Best Buy or somewhere and pick up a new one. Um,
Right.
but there are hands that do have USB-C that are some that are new on the market. There's a hand called the Psionic Ability hand that it's USB-C. They were actually just on Shark Tank. Pretty cool hand. Too big for me. They don't have small size yet, and it just I got to test it. Didn't really work out for me. I test a lot of the devices. I actually have a hand here right now that I'm testing from a Ukrainian company called Esper, um, which
Did
is
you say how long or I guess they all vary, but what are the battery life like? Would you say daily?
most of the hands will be probably around 10 to 12 hours of daily use.
Okay.
It's like daily wear use, right? So how I'm normally functioning on a regular day. Now, if I'm at a conference or if I'm on set or something like that, doing a repetitive task, especially if it's like a wrist to hand thing, because the wrist and hand are separate. So I'd have to move wrist, switch back to hand, move wrist, switch back to hand. That pulls a lot of battery. It's
Yeah.
like FaceTime, right? If you're using your phone, it pulls a lot more. So there are days where I kill my arm throughout halfway through the day, and I'm like, now I'm just wearing a really expensive paperweight.
Yeah. For the
Looks
most
nice
part,
though.
like play flights. Flights are usually
Yeah.
usually not going to run out of battery on a
Just on a
flight or
plane.
anything like
Oh
that.
well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know
yeah.
if you've seen, but I've had quite a few times where I've been like charging my arm in the airport.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
Usually, but most of the time that's because I forgot to charge it the night before, or like, and I was like, oh crap, my arm's gonna die, so I'll like be plugged in next to like the cell phone somewhere, and everyone, and I'll usually record people's reactions of being like trying to figure out what's happening, but like don't want to make eye contact with me. Like what is going on? But yeah, that's been a big thing with that as well. It's just the battery life is important. Um, the motors need to be stronger in the hands. Like I said, the motor in this hand is the older hand is stronger than the motors in my current hand, but there's six of them.
Yeah.
So like obviously I have that articulation to be able to move the hand in a much more specific way, but I don't have the strength. But do I really need the strength if I could feel the hand? Because like that's been the big thing. A lot of people talk about zipping zippers like on backpacks, and they're like, I wish it would grip harder because they keep slipping out of the hand. And it's like, but if you could feel that it was slipping, you could change your grip. So there's different things. Like if obviously I would love stronger grip if we can't figure out haptics, but if we can figure out haptics, then it changes. Like I don't necessarily need to crush things, although it'd be
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Would
I
love to
guess.
crush stuff. It's fun. I don't
Yeah.
know.
See, that's why I was just like, just the videos I was watching is just so fascinating, and I was like, oh my God, not only is she busy, but you're just involved in so much, just everything that you've shared with us today is just like that these aren't the small meetings you're going to. Like these take time and
Yeah,
hours and
yeah.
days and weeks and on end. So I'm just like, man, she was able to fit us in, and so I was like, we got to do all the research, and then so yeah, Tyler was bummed out because he had his questions and stuff as well, but it was he really needed to tend to this other
Yeah,
matter,
I
and
mean,
so
I'm always down to come back, and me
yeah,
and Diani have a lot of stories from set and different things like that. We got along really well.
yeah.
It was always,
Well,
and JB had a great time.
um, I think that would be a good segue to talk about some of your previous roles and lead into Twisted Metal here. One of actually your first role, if I'm not mistaken, was on Green Lantern, right? And you had a story. I might be mixing up my movies now. It was John Lithgow in The Accountant.
The accountant, yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the Green Lantern one first.
So, so I did a lot of extra work when I was in Louisiana, when I was in college, because I wanted to be on set. I wanted to be an actor. I was taking the acting classes, but just like as a one-handed person, obviously I didn't see anyone who looked like me doing things. So I don't think I ever thought of acting as like, oh, I can do this. Like this can be a career. So I was getting my degree in psychology, but I wanted to be on set and I wanted to make money. So I was doing a lot of extra work, and so my first, technically it wasn't like my first speaking role, it was a featured background role. So I was chosen out of a group of people. We were shooting this like scene where it was like in the college at UNO, and the I think it was probably the PA first came in, and they were supposed to choose like a handful of girls for this featured extra role they're casting on the spot, which they don't normally do, right? Normally for featured stuff, a lot of times it's done ahead of time, especially if it's like very featured, which this was. I have more camera time in this than I do in some of my principal roles, which is funny. But which I found out like in the, as my career went on, I was like, oh my god, like you end up on the cutting room floor like 90% of the things you film for a long time. But with this, I think a PA came in, they like took 10 of us, and then an AD came in and they took like another 5 of us, and we're like, what is going on? And at the time I was wearing that skin colored cosmetic arm. And then finally it came in, like the director walked in, who Martin Campbell, who did like Casino Royale and GoldenEye and all those films. He's from New Zealand, and he's a very cool looking guy. And he like walked in, looked at us for like half a second and was like, her, and then walked out. And then all of a sudden everybody just like ran at me and we're like, we gotta get her through hair and makeup, we gotta change her clothes and do this. And I was like, what am I doing? Like I had no idea what was going on. They're like, you're gonna run in late for class. Like the scene needs to start. I guess they realized that there was no like active momentum into the room for this scene. That's my assumption. I'm guessing. And so they had me like hit a corner, run down the hall, throw open this door where Peter Sarsgaard, who's in the movie, was doing this big lecture to the classroom, and it leads into all these other things happening. And I was so excited. I was like, oh yeah, 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 let's do this. Like I was in hair and makeup, and I was like so excited. And then all of a sudden I looked down and I'm like, I have one arm. Does he know I have one arm? I don't think he knows I have one arm because I'm wearing the cosmetic arm, right? I wore that for extra work because I thought my arm was going to stand out in a way that was negative. Like for some reason, I thought disabled people just couldn't exist, right? Like I knew that we did, right? I knew that. But in
Right.
movies and television, very rarely do you just see people with disabilities around, right? Like it leads to why people think that people with disabilities don't really exist that much because we're not really around very often in this kind of situation. So I was like, well, I don't want to draw attention. And I thought that for some reason people would think that I needed an explanation of why a character was back there with one arm. So I always wore this cosmetic arm. So I went to the PA, who was like, a PA, a production assistant, like lowest on the totem pole besides me. And I was like, hey, I need to talk to the director. And then they just like laughed at me. And I was like, I have one arm. And he was like, I'll be right back. Like, so I was like kind of rehearsing what I was going to say in my head. I was like, okay, what am I going to tell him? Like, I want to do this. And so he walks in and he kind of just very cool. And he's like, I'm sorry, like, what's the problem? And I just like launched into talking as much as I talk now, right? I'm like, I really want to do this. I take acting classes. I've been wanting to be acting my whole life. I've done like theater growing up, and I get how it works, and like I might be distracting from your scene. And so I wanted you to know, because if you want to pick someone else, like I won't be upset. It'll be okay. Like it's not a big deal if you want to pick the other person, because there was another girl. And he's just like looking at me, has no idea what I'm talking about. And I was like, oh, the PA didn't tell him. I was like, I have one arm. And he kind of like looks down and like notices, and, like looks at me, and he was like, have you ever been late for class before? And I was like, yes. I'm in college now and I have been late for class before. And he was like, well, I don't see a reason why this can't be you. He said, do you not want to do it? I was like, no, I want to do it. He was like, well, great. And like it was just that little kind of affirmation or confirmation from somebody that was that important in the industry, that was just like, yeah, you can be here, which like I knew that I'm around and I'm late for class and I do all this stuff. Like I knew those things, that I exist and were around. But to hear him go like, yeah, it doesn't change the story. I'm like, I knew that, but sometimes it takes hearing that from somebody else. And he was great. He was so lovely throughout the entire filming. And one day I hope I get to talk to him again and like tell him thank you and all that. But from that moment, I literally was like delaying getting an agent and doing all these things because I just thought I I can't make this a thing. So I was like, why not? So I started looking for an agent. I got an agent, and then within the year, I booked the accountant, which was another role that I did, and that was my first like SAG speaking role. Even though my lines got cut, I got to do a scene with John Lithgow, and that was amazing and awesome. And that was actually literally a week after I got my bionic. So I had it for
Oh,
a
okay.
week. And the call went out that they were looking for somebody who was able to, an actor who was able to operate a high-tech prosthesis. And there were several of us in the running that I knew. And because I had been a prosthesis user for so long, I was little bit better than some of the other people. And my arm was brand new and looked really cool. So that definitely helped. I remember being in a grocery store and the casting director reaching out to me, being like, "Can you send me a picture of you picking up a coin?" And I literally was in the grocery store and I set a coin down on the shelf and I just like reached down and picked it up and sent that little iPhone video. And then they had me on a plane to Atlanta like the next day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The more just to go back to the Martin Campbell one real quick, because I don't know how he is. I don't know what his demeanor is like. You know, I've seen like images and
Yeah.
stuff. So like as you were kind of teeing up the story, I was all like, oh, is he like one of those dramatic ones? Like, well, do your legs work? Can you
Yeah.
open the door still? Well, this is your role. You know, so I was expecting
Yeah.
something like that, but that's amazing that they was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't see why this. Is there any other problems other than you having one arm? Like that's part of the world. That people have one arm.
Yeah. And like that was it. Like
Yeah,
for him to just kind of be like, you've done this, right? Like you do this, then do it in the way that you would do it, you know? Because like that was my big concern. Like they were like, oh, they're gonna have me throw open the door. What if? Because I was like, oh, I could not tell him, right? I had that whole thought process. I could not tell anyone, and then I'm running down the hall, and then I hear, because you know how sets work is everyone just yells things out, right? Like. So it could be like, move your left arm. Like, why are you, if I was running down the hall, like full sprinting, late for class, open the door with your left hand. I would be like, can't do those things. So like I was so worried that it was going to become like a thing that I was like, let me just throw it out there first and see what he has to say. And it, it could have been very different, right?
yeah, right.
Different, if
Yeah,
it different day for him, different mood for him, but thankfully that's his feelings, that was his feelings on it. And it was great. And I had had so many things that I had been at that point that were like cut that I remember I didn't even go see it. I didn't even tell people. So I remember getting the first message of being like, I just saw you in Green Lantern. I'm like, someone just saw me in Green Lantern. Because like you just stop telling people sometimes because you never know what's gonna show up.
right. Yeah, I have definitely learned that from a lot of the conversations I've had where, like sometimes I might reach out to somebody prematurely and they say, well, I didn't get the screeners. I want to see what I did first before I say yes, because they don't know if their entire scene got
Oh,
cut
for sure.
and things like that, you know. And so,
It's
but
terrifying.
yes, I can only imagine. But I do love what you like the story that you just shared. Like a lot of people, they're just whether they're ignorant or just not privy to the idea of like other different people existing, skin
Hmm.
color or otherwise as
Yeah.
well. I remember somebody I worked with, they're like, "Oh, do you see that reboot? They're like including all these other like nationalities too." I'm just like, but we exist as well."
They existed the first time it was made, and for some reason we didn't
Yeah,
acknowledge it then.
yeah, yeah. I guess you just want, shows to be just like all white people, I guess.
Yeah, it's a
There's
really interesting concept of like people not understanding diversity because like or just inclusion in general because like media technically has like this huge responsibility that I don't think people think about as much like in entertainment is the idea that like depending on where you live, you may only see people that look like you.
yeah,
So actually, like it is a huge responsibility for them to appropriately show what New York City looks like, to appropriately show what New Orleans look like, because that is the world. And
right.
if we're not actually showing different experiences of people, people think only their experience exists,
Yeah,
which is not the case. Like there's so many different experiences, whether it's, socioeconomic status, and whether it's skin color, whether it's, there's just so many differences that people have in their daily life. And if you only know your own experience, then you're uninformed about everything else. And it's hard to be mad at people about that when like maybe they can't only leave their people are like, oh, everyone should travel. Not everyone can travel,
yeah,
so the entertainment industry actually does have this huge responsibility that sometimes I feel like people don't realize when they're like, I just want to be entertained. And it's like, sure, sure, sure. I get that. And you will be. But we're also making sure that you understand what the world looks like.
right? And we get a good glimpse of the world in a show called Twisted Metal, where you see so many different people of all backgrounds and the words that I can't even think of right now, but all walks of life, are represented in the show. So can you talk about like how you came across this? Or was it what they were looking for in the character of Tinker?
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually auditioned for Watts originally,
Okay.
which had nothing to do with a limb difference at all. I'm from Louisiana. That casting was out of Louisiana or Southeast locals were looked at specifically for that in that capacity because there's a lot of really talented people in the Southeast as well. So I remember going out for Watts and being so excited. Loved the character. Um, Prepped like hardcore for Watts and did all this stuff. And uh, I love Jamie is the perfect person for it though, and just like absolutely killed it. But like I know, like I also know lots of other actors who did audition for it in the Southeast. Like we were all stoked on it because it was such a fun character. Um, and then I remember reading through the breakdown and getting to Tinker and reaching out to my agent and saying like, "Hey, keep your eye out for this because there's a character that had the description of what she was. It was kind of like she is the convoy mechanic. She has a scene, where she gives Steffi Beatrice's character a prosthetic finger. And then in the parentheses, it was like, please let us know if talent has an amputation. So it wasn't like we're definitely looking for somebody who has a limb difference or an amputation or wears a prosthesis, right? It was kind of like, would be cool. Would be cool if she did, like that kind of thing. So I know a lot of people who auditioned for Tinker as well. Some of my good friends. Uh, and that's what was like really,
Sorry, just a little video bomb for those at home. My daughter, she sees dad behind a microphone and sometimes
hello.
likes to say hi. Would you like to meet her? Her name is Angel.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Oh, here. Sorry. I guess there you go. What's your name? Penelope.
Hi, Penelope. I'm Angel.
She just woke up from her nap, so she likes to do this and say hello sometimes. Okay, go back upstairs, okay? Huh? Daddy has to finish up speaking to Angel. Okay? All right, go upstairs. Okay? I'll see you later. So she does that almost on every different podcast. Yeah,
Love
she's
that.
yeah,
I love that for us. I love that for
uh,
her. Her glasses are
yeah,
iconic.
yeah. The people love the glasses. They always
Yeah,
point out the glasses. Yeah, they love
that
it.
is, if she ever had like a character, that would be like the huge part, like a cartoon or something like that would be like the
Yeah,
standout.
kind of like a
Penelope
Granny
and her
Dread.
pink glasses. Yeah, yeah, yes.
Granny Dread
Love.
has some
Oh,
amazing glasses,
also
but
as an actress, she's so lovely and wonderful. She absolutely killed it. Watching her perform was amazing.
I love the Convoy group.
Yeah,
It's one of my favorite episodes. I feel that was the episode that was the first episode that got me emotional. I did not see that coming, with what was going on with Granny Dread, and then
right.
the relationship between Watts and Amber,
Hmm.
so I love that. And you're right with Jamie, like her
She kills
um
it. Like
line
there's not a
delivery.
choice, not a choice. Like I
Oh,
got to watch her like because obviously I wanted to know who it was after I booked Tinker, and then I was excited to work with Watts. I'm like, I wonder who this is. But I was like, oh, easily like
yeah,
that. Sometimes you just know, like you see a person and it has nothing to do with. Um, I don't feel any type of way. I'm like, that is who that is, and that's who it
yeah,
was supposed to be. Same, I
right.
mean, same thing with Amber. Like what
Yeah.
she brought to that character was so different than what anybody else would have brought to
Yeah,
that
she shared
character.
that story that's not even like her look was not what they
Yeah.
had in mind
Yep.
and rewrote it. Yeah.
That's what's so like awesome about the show too is I feel like they truly just from the jump like a lot of times it takes sometimes time shows to do this where they like start to write in things for the characters and the actors playing it, but they were like, oh, that's how this person is, let's make that happen, let's do this. I think they just kind of were really quick to be like, this would be a cool thing because they're already doing this or they're like that. And that was really fun to see it happen, especially so fast. Like when I got asked back to be on 9 and 10, like that was kind of like, oh, this is really fun. This makes sense. Like it was so exciting. But yeah, like the shooting that first episode, the four, I was very nervous. Um, I think just all kind of happened very quickly of like getting there and doing stuff like that. Like I was in LA at the time, so I had to go back to Louisiana, which is where I'm from and where I live most of the time, or a lot of the time. But yeah, getting to meet everybody, and then we kind of got thrown into like a friendship, but like all of us were like it was such great casting because we were all just like immediately friends. And you don't always have that, where just like everyone has like really great chemistry right away. Um, and we did, and so it just made everything like a lot more fun to be able to do it that way.
So with Tinker, they what what uh what else were they? Well, I know you said what was the thing that you said that they were also saying like kind of let us know if they were also an amputee?
Yeah, so the note was just let us know if they also like if they are an amputee. So just so, like for my agent to note on like here's my audition. So like everybody submitted their audition. So like here's Angel. By the way, she also has a prosthesis, you know. Um, and then that was it. Like I did my callback and stuff like that. They weren't even really like I didn't even get a lot of like tell us about her arm. Like we want to hear more. It was kind of just like this. I'm assuming this works, you know. And I had a lot of fun with that audition. It was pretty similar to the scene that I did in four. We ended up kind of playing with it a little bit. Stephanie's so fun to work with. It was like first shot of the day. Literally first shot of the day was that shot with us. And I was kind of like, I didn't know the tone yet, right? That was kind of like the hard part too, is like, wait a second, I'm first up. I haven't seen anyone do anything. Like, knowing what I know, like action comedy, but like how comedy, but like, you know what I mean? Like, trying
Uh,
and discerning tone in this show is a thing, right?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
so like I was like, okay, and I do think about like I was like I would have done some things maybe a little bit different later on, knowing kind of where we sat. But I mean, from the direction I got, like I'm happy with obviously everything that happened. But it was just really funny, like having her get the finger or choose the finger she wanted. And also, a lot of my arms ended up as set dressing. So like they
Okay.
had like set deck of like what was going on, and I had showed up with all my arms, right? I actually had come straight from I was at something called Lucky Finn Project Weekend, which is like this event that I do every year that's like volunteer to meet with like families and kids who have limb differences. And we all do like this big picnic in Michigan. So I had like rhinestones all over one of my arms and like I had like all this decoration. And I remember MJ being like, yeah, that one. Like he was like, that one goes. And like, so I remember wearing like just like some of the more fun things. And then we just ended up with them all on the table. I was like, why not? Just put them all everywhere. They all look cool. Like, I was like, yes, like, let's put all the arms everywhere. And that's something I like too, because a lot of times I'll end up on shows and I'm like, well, where's my arm chargers? Where's this? Where's that? And they're like, well, is that detracting from the story? And I'm like, no. You have a one handed character. Why would you not have an arm charger around somewhere? Like, to me, I'm like, that's part of the story and it helps make it more real. That's why I'm here, right? Not that, I mean, obviously I did a good job in my audition, but like the whole point is for this to be, I don't know. I would like to bring some realism to it as being a one handed person rather than like a world where like this would look the same if a two handed person did it. But yeah, it was definitely playing with Stephanie and getting to do those lines back and forth. And then I think one of the times where I was like, don't get it wet, her reaction killed me. Like just the way that she like what is gonna happen like
Right.
was like my favorite thing. And I just remember them calling cut and just like losing my mind.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
brilliant.
I know. I feel that like we can. Well, when I say we, kind of everybody, we can eventually get there, right? Like in Hollywood with, um, as we continue to show more representation. I remember when the Disney's Turning Red came out.
Mhm.
Right, and I don't know if you saw it, but somebody commented that they're like, "Oh, like there was insulin in a scene, like we're represented in an animation,
Yeah.
So it's like little things like that people don't
If
remember,
I'm being
and or
honest with you, Pixar is always on their game. Like animated films are so far ahead of any type of live action stuff. So Finding Nemo is my first real representation of a
yeah,
limb difference.
yeah,
And
right.
a great one, hence Lucky Fin Project. Like that
Okay,
is literally the first time that I ever had a character that was just limb different from birth and the story wasn't about it.
yeah.
Like they were like, he's just like you just like can't do some stuff, Nemo. Like there's
I
just so
forget
many
that, because it's just that's
because it
just Nemo
wasn't
to me.
about it. Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
like and that's kind of the point is like we can just exist and it doesn't need to be the story. The
Right.
story isn't us existing. The story is something else entirely, but our existence is part of it. So yeah, they do that is a good point of like Turning Red and like all those films like they do a great job being the first and people kind of push back against it for the reason of it hasn't happened yet, but like it should
Right.
be.
Right. Yeah. It has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um. Now, could you share, like your relationship with Diani?
Mhm.
Because we don't see you guys together until episode 9.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, but speaking with Diani, obviously, like you guys are pretty close.
Yeah, one of my favorite humans in just like the entire world, which I think if everyone had the opportunity to meet her, they would also feel that way. Yeah, I'm
I,
sure you also
I,
feel that way. Like just ace human being. Like so we got along from the jump. Both of us just can't stop talking, and in a positive way, like we're just like we cannot stop making jokes, and I think she's the funniest person I've ever met. Um, and we just literally spent all of our free time in each other's trailers, which is like not normally what happens on set. Like, especially when you just meet each other. And she'd be so sweet. She'd be like, I'm sorry if I'm taking up all your time. I'm like, I'm in your trailer. Like, am I taking up your? She's like, no, I want you to stay. And I'm like, I want to stay. But yeah, we just had so much fun together. And I think that was like pretty evident too. And then getting to be together in scenes and like having our relationship shown on camera too was really nice. Um, to be able to be there in those moments with her as an actor and a person, like it was just, we had such a good time.
yeah.
Obviously, it didn't turn out well for me, but that's okay.
We don't know. It's a video. I mean, I don't think the jury's out on like the physics and the supernatural elements of that is Twisted Metal. I mean, look at Sweet Tooth's hair.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's on fire. The orange hair should also be.
I should
I don't.
say, as of yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't say anyone couldn't come back from burns. Nobody ever checked for a pulse, guys. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know that. There was just, but there's definitely, that day was a lot too. Just so hot in Louisiana and having to throw like a heat mat down on the, motorway ground and then me jumped out like them pick it up me jump down shoot the shot me jump up like there's
Yeah.
fire around me it's also 100 degrees outside and um it was a lot of fun but a lot going on.
What about when Amber gets shot through
Hmm.
the windshield? What can you share about that sequence?
Yeah, so when we choose our weapons, like when we're still in the convoy, right? There was like this thing of which weapon they wanted to hand me. And of course, me being someone who's handled weapons, I was like, wait a second, I need to make sure that I could, because obviously that was going to continue on into the next scene. So we had to choose a weapon that I was able to like handle efficiently, especially being in the cab and in the area of the truck. Uh, and then when we got to that scene, obviously like I'm holding the weapon and then there was discussions on set of, as this scene plays through and as this injury happens, me grabbing the walkie, if I'm going to grab it with my left hand, which I was like, that's a dice roll, y'all. Like I could try my hardest, but like I can't guarantee it's gonna read pretty every time, right? Like I could probably do it, but it might take a couple takes. And it depends how much time they wanted to spend on it. And they're like, I don't think we need that. And then also going for Amber's neck, right? Of just like physically holding it. The Be Bionic wasn't waterproof, so getting blood or sweat
Right.
or any of those things on it. And on top of that, like I said, it was really hot. So when we talk about sweat and things like that, one of the times I went to reach for her neck and the electrodes had moved. And I went to kind of change my positioning and my hand just squeezed. And I ended up grabbing Yanni's neck and I couldn't let go. Um, I'm like, they're calling cut, and I'm looking at her, and she's obviously like being squeezed. And wait, wait, don't move, don't move, don't move, because I'm like, the more that she moved, and she's fine and laughing, and we were okay. But I was just like mortified, where I'm like, of course, this is something that's happening right now. But I did break my hand by the end of that scene. The hand didn't make it through that. I'd get some repairs later on. I had a spare. It's fine.
Oh God, yeah. See, so there's just a lot of planning, that people don't think about that needs to go into somebody that has a
Mhm.
prosthesis,
I would
and
love to
yeah,
just worry about performance all the time and it'd be only be performance. And it would be cool, like I said, sets just don't work like that, right? When we talk, we mentioned this before, but like sometimes like things aren't important until they're important, and I try to flag them as important because they're important for me, but just the way the industry runs, like they don't understand why that's important yet. And I get it; they haven't encountered that, and like you can always tell when people have been on sets with like other disabled people or people who have like mobility devices and things like that because they'll ask the questions. They'll ask the questions that I'm like, yes. Who did you work with? Like, like how do you know? Um, because yeah, you get there on the day and I'm like, hey, I need to walk. We need to do a walkthrough of this, and it isn't a problem, and it shouldn't be a problem, but it's one of those things where they just hadn't thought about it that way, and it actually ends up being beneficial to kind of everybody involved. And when in the scheme of things, right? Like just like adding ramps to sets actually makes productivity go up because the cameras are all on wheels. Like, like it actually helps productivity if you had more ramps around. But but yeah, so like there was definitely some planning that needs to go into some of these shots, and it cannot, but it'll lead to kind of that problem solving happening on set. And sometimes I'm like, I think my performance could have been a little bit better if we didn't spend an hour sorting through my arm in the shot or something.
yeah,
But I love what I do, and we're getting there. We're definitely making strides in like how this goes, and if I just continue to do what I'm doing and work with people that are the way that I've like MJ and all these people that are like super supportive and excited and willing to he asked so many great questions when we were shooting 10 about like stuff to do with my arm, and it just was so nice to have somebody like really truly care and like ask good questions. I remember my arm broke. He was like, oh, like, do you want us to we can handle that? I was like, no, I have insurance, like I'm okay. Like, my hands insured, we're all right. But it was one of those things where it's just like you can feel it when people have a different viewpoint on these things, and it was just exciting to work with such a team that was like, yes, this is cool, this is fun, this is exciting, and feel that and have that energy.
yeah, that's awesome. I probably have like a few more questions as we get ready to wrap up.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but back at the convoy, there was a sequence where I'm pretty sure I saw Tinker dancing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, get some getting down there. So can you talk about like uh and actually the very first time we see Tinker is actually she's in the background,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so like she's already there. Like if you're lucky, there she is. So it's
Hmm.
not gonna be a complete surprise when like Quiet and John turn around and she's like she's already in the sequence as well. So can you talk about like uh kind of like the directions and the things you guys are supposed to do like in the background as like the other characters have dialogue and things like that. And like the dancing, I'm assuming the music is added in post, right? Or do you guys have something playing quietly,
Oh
then you
yeah.
have something? Okay, so all
Okay,
of that.
so we were not dancing to that song. We were
Not
dancing.
tattoo.
There
Okay.
was music playing. We were actually dancing to Nelly, It's Getting Hot in Here. Um, and it was very hot in there, like very hot. Just, we were in this, it's a truck bed, right? And there it had it's on I can't think of the right word, but it's
Uh,
moving like we're
yeah, yeah,
driving.
right.
Like so, that has the whole wobble, which is reminiscent of when I was on Snowpiercer because I also had that for the train that I was on.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, I've done this. But yeah, like the first scene that I shot was actually the dialogue scene. So we did that one first, and then my dialogue scene with Stephanie, and then it kind of went backwards from there and shot the different parts of it throughout the day. Uh, of like, okay, so Tinker would be here during that time, so they'd bring me in. They're like, what would she be doing? And I'm like, okay, well, so I'm gonna be working on this with a screwdriver to pick this up. I'm gonna try to sell this hand to this two-handed person. Like that was always my favorite thing when someone come up and be like, "What do you need?" And I'm like, "You don't need this. This isn't for you. Maybe later." But a lot of the extras in the scene or background artists, they were really kind people. I'm friends with a lot of them on Instagram right now. They're all really fun. They utilized a lot of the same people throughout the convoy. If you notice, a lot of the same people came back. Um, so that was fun. Definitely getting to do all that stuff while everyone else is having dialogue. And then the dance party sequence was super fun. I was bummed that like when you film something all day, like that was a whole day thing, I think, practically, where we did all that scene. Um, and I don't know if this made it in. I don't think it did, but we had like the what are they, no-dos, kind of like uppers, and I was like passing them out to people because
Oh,
like truck
okay.
drivers, right? Like
Yeah,
truck
yeah, no,
drivers
no,
silly
those.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like passing them out and doing that. And so like, we did so much fun stuff that day. Like there were so many like little actions throughout that scene that the extras were doing and that we were doing and they were catching, and you never know it's gonna make it into this final cut of like the party. Um, and we did all the dancing sequences, and everybody was just, we literally were dancing for so long, just like having a blast back there. And it was really funny because like I didn't know how visible I was. I just knew that I was existing. And so I started like goofing off, and I like threw my middle fingers up and we're like spinning my hands and like doing this stuff. And then I just hear one of the camera ops just like cracking up, and they had done like a pan zoom to just me, like, because we were like, it's getting hot in here, right? So I'm just
Right.
and then it ends up being like Tattoo, which I love the song, but
Yeah,
like I don't know if that
great
plays.
song.
Like I don't know if that action still works, but I was like having a blast, and we had such a good time doing that scene. I really enjoyed it. And then you see like what you're like, okay, it was fun like that. That checks out.
Yeah, the that makes I don't want to say that makes sense, but like the context that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
the hunt here and then the dancing. But I do like the tattoo song for like the dialogue and what's going on, what's being said
right.
between.
I
Yeah,
don't think I
that's
think we all knew it was never gonna be that song.
yeah.
I
I
think
feel
that
like
was
they
the
try to get it
understanding.
close, so that's why when you say like hot in here, I'm just like, that's not the same as tattoo, not even close.
I don't think they knew it yet. Maybe they didn't know yet. I'm sure there was a
Yeah,
list of things that they wanted, I'm sure. And
go up
you just
100.
narrow it down to what plays or like what
Yeah,
works.
right. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about was called the ADA.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing
Yeah,
that up. So,
yeah. So just watched it earlier today.
yeah,
A
did you?
little
What'd you think?
little detective, right? Detective
Yeah,
Badgley or something like that.
Badgley, which is funny
Okay.
because originally it was written as Bagley, and
Okay.
my co-star, he just kept wanting to say Badgley, which I thought was hilarious because we're detectives. And eventually it just got to the point where we're like, you know what? She's Badgley. She's just Badgley. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be Badgley.
I'll let you talk about it, but I wasn't sure about the tone until you flashed the badge and I laughed.
Yeah,
I don't know. I noticed something about the little flash of like, hey, I'm also like, look, okay, and then I was like,
yeah,
okay, yeah,
yeah.
it's really hilarious. It's
So
like 5 minutes.
yep, yep. So every year for this is the 11th year, it's the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, which has only been sponsored by Easter Seals, I think, the last few years. But Disability Film Challenge in general was started by Nick Novicki, and it was just to bring disabled people in front of or behind the camera and allow them to do some type of work, because a lot of times people just don't get to see us, right? Whatever type of talent or skill that we have. So it was kind of like, hey, here's a challenge. We're going to give you like a 48-hour film festival, right? Like a 48-hour challenge. You get a theme. So it was buddy comedy this year. You get props that have to be integrated. You get a location that has to be integrated, and it all has to be done in 5 days. And that's longer than most competitions. But if you think about disabled people, we have like accessibility stuff, so you do
Sure.
need to kind
Yeah.
of finding accessible locations is not as easy as you would want it to be, and different things like that. So we have 5 days to do the whole film, edit, score, film, like every single thing. Find the location. So this year was buddy comedy. The locations were like parking lot, storefront, and then the props were like pretzel, coffee cup, phone, that kind of thing. So you have to like write the script in the time period that you're given, and then it was like the subgenres were a dynamic duo or a rivalry. And Gerald and I are friends, and David Radcliffe, who is a writer, he's written for The Rookie, he writes for CBS Tracker, and he is a wheelchair user, has cerebral palsy. And so he wrote the script, and we're friends as well. And he was like, "I'm doing this team. Do you want to be on my team?" And I was like, "Of course, let's do it." And we shot it all, and now it's out. And right now is the awareness campaign. So there's different awards, obviously, like any competition. There is best film, best actor, and that kind of thing. But because obviously, as disabled people, we're just trying to get as many eyes on our work as possible, this is the awareness campaign. So every like, view, comment on the YouTube link or the YouTube channel that has our video on it lends us into getting a prize that allows us to develop the project. So into a feature or into a series is what we're hoping. We think it would be really cool. So the premise is like a cop spoof, almost like a Law and Order Brooklyn Nine-Nine tone, kind of, is what, if that's kind of what you're thinking. Just straight cop show, except what it's supposed to be is if there was an enforcement agency that enforced ADA violations. And that came out of the fact that a lot of people think that when a disabled person encounters a violation of the Americans with Disability Act, that there's someone you can call that enforces it. But there isn't. You actually typically have to get a lawyer and do a lawsuit, which everyone's like, "Oh, like that sounds like people just want money." And it's like, no, you just want the problem fixed. That's your route. You have to physically do it as a person. There's no one that I'd be like, "Excuse me, ADA, can you go in there, flash a badge, and tell them they've committed a crime?" And so we were like, well, what if that did exist? What if there was a department that just showed up and was like, "This is an ADA violation and you need to fix this problem." So we kind of go through that, and then also introducing just generally how those things are kind of looked at, and like whether it's performative, or there's a line where he's like, "Just go out there and wave your arm and spin your wheels and, just like smile like you're supposed to." And it's kind of like, "Oh, we didn't expect you to actually do anything. We just wanted people to know you exist."
Yeah.
Um, Kind of reminiscent of a lot of the things, that we deal with as just being minorities or being a marginalized group. People just expect you to show up and like be happy that you're there. Which I am always happy that I'm there, but I think sometimes that's expecting the bare minimum. So would love for people to watch Call the ADA. The awareness campaign ends on the 21st, so would be cool. Likes, comments, whatever. But just watch it and let us know what you think. Would be awesome. It's a really
Yeah.
fun project to work on.
I'll share that in the show notes. So even if it's after, past the 21st, at least the link is still there for you guys to check out on
Yes,
YouTube.
it'll
Yeah.
be there forever. I
So
mean, I
yeah,
hope.
so check it out. I already shared it on Instagram earlier today.
Thank you.
It was more of a tease for anybody that follows that, like, hey, Angel might be the next interview. And so I like to kind of tease a little bit over on the grams, for those that don't follow me and would like to. Angel, is there anything else? Thank you so much for giving me your time, and this has been extremely educational. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to continue um watching more of your videos just to see all the other things that you've done. Is just really, really, truly fascinating stuff.
I
Um,
really, really appreciate it. I actually have two more shows coming out coming
yes,
up.
I was about to say anything else you'd like to plug that we can
Well,
keep an
it's
eye out
funny.
for.
Like I would love to, but of course I was waiting for them to be announced, and I can't now. I can't yet. But
Okay.
so just like keep an eye on it. What is a guest star? What is a co-star? They're both network shows, so it'll be fun. Nothing as big as Gianni yet because she's a rock star, but I aspire to be as cool as her one day.
Well, that is something that we try to do is any sort of like housekeeping at the beginning of our like episode breakdowns, which we've only done two at this point. but you know, life, work, and like I host all these other shows, but we are happy that season two, you know, they're the writers' room, and so as we are still going through season one, we're definitely anything that we can remember, like oh, any announcements to kind of keep an eye on some of the cast members. So when those get announced, we will try to remember to mention those.
I
But
appreciate
yeah,
it. Yeah, that'll be
yeah.
great. I'm excited
Uh,
about all of them. One of them I get to
it,
play a parent, which is pretty cool because you don't get to see disabled people as parents a lot of the times.
not yet.
Yeah, not yet. So I get to do it. I get to be a mom, and I have a
Yeah,
little baby. So that's one of the things like I'm excited about. Just for representation wise, we very
yeah.
rarely get to be shown as caregivers. So
Well,
I'm
I
excited
love
about
that.
that.
Yeah, I can't wait. So, yeah, if we don't remember, if it's announced before we get to our episode three, which is we're in the works for now, taking the notes and the stuff. We got this other guy who does like the Easter eggs for us, Radic. Shout
Hmm.
out to Radic. So he's really cool. So we're waiting on that as well. And if we don't announce it, if it's out by the episode three, you're in episode four. There's no way I forget to make any of those announcements. You know, like oh yo, that's right, Angel was just it was just announced these kind of things. So we have a few episodes that
It
you'll be
literally
in
comes out
coming
in
up.
2 weeks. I have no idea why they haven't announced it
Oh,
yet.
okay. Well, I bet you maybe tomorrow at the time of this
Yeah,
recording,
honestly, I
it
thought it would.
Monday.
I literally was like, I'm like, was checking if I could say it today before, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
Oh
guys,
man.
come
Okay.
on, make your
Well, there you guys
announcement.
go. There's a tease for that.
A tease for a tease of a
Yeah, tease
tease.
for tease. Yeah. All right, Angel, where can people give you a follow if they want to check out your really cool pictures and videos, and just anything else that you're putting out there?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. You can search my name, Angel Giuffria, ANGELGIUFFRIA. My handle is annoying and I haven't changed it yet, so just by name usually works. You can
Yeah,
check out my
it's
IMDb or
well,
anything like that.
it's pretty easy. It's your name, but every letter is doubled except for the L, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
which
it is.
is
Yeah,
two, which is four.
yeah, yeah. So
Most people are like
AANNGG.
very
Yeah.
confused.
So
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's two of everything, four L's. So Angel. I do need to change it. 18-year-old me thought that was a great idea to have as my handle, and
yeah,
then like I have weird attachment to it.
that's one thing I don't believe they've incorporated into Twist Metal, like our AOL names. From back
Yes,
in the day.
I
So
agree. I
those need to
agree
come up. These
totally.
AOL names. I want to hear all of you guys' AOL names from back in the day.
Angel
I had
G 999 because I
that was
didn't
yours.
want it to be 666, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah. There you
I was
go.
like 999, which is not the same thing. It should have been 777 if I now
I have some audio
understand.
cues that is my cue to
Oh,
end this one. And
yeah,
so for me that anybody that wants to follow me real quick, I am Twisted Metal Pod on both Instagram and Twitter, slash X, whatever you want to call it.
same.
Not as active on X though. I think Instagram is where I spend most of my time. Angel, anything else you want to throw out before we end this?
No, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And, you know, don't get it wet, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely don't get it wet. Most things are probably not best, but unless it's like something cooked and hydration, I feel. So yeah, most
A
things get damaged
gremlins.
when it comes to water and yeah, water damage. So, all right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode, and we will catch you guys next time.